there, welcome to HR Shop Talk. I'm your host, Andrea Adams. We talk about HR with people who know what they're doing. You can also find me on YouTube, where you can interact with me and others like yourself. Today, my guest is Irina Ketkin. Irina is an L&D professional who I found through her course on Udemy. Well, I guess that's more than one course on Udemy. She also has a YouTube channel called the L&D Academy, which has some amazing high-quality stuff on there. You should check it out. Hi, Irina. How are you?
Hi, Andrea. I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on. So I want to start with the super basics. What is learning and development?
And that's a very good place to start because there are a lot of misconceptions about what learning and development is or what it does. So first and foremost, let's, as you say, get down to the basics. Usually learning and development is part of HR. And the main reason it exists, the main purpose of this function is to improve the organizational and the individual effectiveness and performance. The way we do that is through the various learning experiences that we design, we implement, and then hopefully evaluate to see what the change has been. But at the end of the day, it's really, as cheesy as it may sound, it's about unlocking the potential that's there, both within human beings and individuals and within the organization as a collective whole.
So I kind of see L&D as people who put together training and deliver it. Is that accurate? What does an L&D person actually do?
That's actually a very good question because it feeds into one of the myths about learning and development. A lot of times when people hear learning and development, and the business in particular, they think, oh, these are the guys that do the trainings, right? But the truth is that learning and development people or practitioners, they have at their disposals a multitude of different tools and instruments that they can use apart from training. So I like to use this one particular example of how do babies learn to walk? Well, they don't sign up to classes, do they? They try, they crawl. That's how they learn. And adults are kind of no different in that respect, although there are some major differences, and I'd be happy to talk about the adult learning principles.
Well,
but at the end of the day, human people, human beings don't just go to training to learn. We learn through a range of options. And just to mention some of those to kind of make it a bit more practical, we have things like coaching, we have things like mentoring, online courses or e-learning. We have a blend of all of these, or we have action learning, working on projects, problem solving, brainstorming, so many different options to kind of learn and grow as a human being, but also as a professional. So yes, learning and development do trainings, but usually an effective learning and development function doesn't focus on training as much as it does on kind of the overall learning experience.
That reminds me of something that I've seen. It's a pyramid, a learning pyramid, and you learn 10% through training and
yes,
20%
20% through social, and 70% through practical tasks. Absolutely. This is one of the research that was done back in the 80s, and that's how the 70-20-10 model or framework was invented, so to speak. I like to use the word framework or an idea because it's not a theory, it's not a model that you need to follow blindly. But it basically tells you that when it comes to effectiveness of learning, it has been discovered, it has been shown that usually around 10% comes from formal training, be that workshops, courses. 20% comes from talking to other people, being in, or participating in dialogue. And then 70% comes from actually doing the work. And I'm sure you can relate to this because when was the last time you had to learn something new? I guess you didn't immediately think, oh, I need to sign up for a course on that. Probably you asked someone around you, hey, do you know how to do that? Or you Googled it, or you just tried to power through it by trying different things as you go along. So this is pretty much the rule of thumb or the idea behind the 70-20-10.
So does L&D have anything to do with that 70% of that on-the-job learning? Do you
Absolutely.
And so how do you impact that 70%?
So that's one of the biggest challenges in learning and development. How do you actually make sure you integrate learning into the day-to-day? Because training means people are away from the job. Working on projects, again, means taking people away from the job. And not a lot of businesses can afford that in the long term. And so one of the biggest challenges is kind of, as I said, to integrate learning, to make it part of your day-to-day. Some of the best practices, let's say, is that learning and development are really great stakeholder managers. They understand who's who, how the network is interconnected, how to manage those different relationships. And that in itself is the foundation on which all learning and development interventions should be built. And let me just give you a very kind of easy example. Let's say that you're walking down the corridor of your office, you meet up with someone from sales and they tell you, oh, you know what, we've been having such a crazy time right now. We have so many orders, we can't fulfill them, customers are complaining, blah, blah, blah. And so as an L&D, you sort of have two options, very roughly speaking. You can say, oh, I'm really sorry about that, and kind of move on and go on with your day. Or you can have a conversation with that person and try and understand what are some of the challenges, what are some of the things that they're going through, and then think from the perspective of learning, what can you offer them? Maybe you can bring in someone to help them, someone to kind of motivate them or to increase their engagement. Or maybe you can bring in someone who can solve their problem, someone even within the organization who has been through that in the past and can share with them that knowledge. Or you can get them all together and sort of hit pause and tell them, okay, let's brainstorm. Let's try and figure out how can we solve this issue, because clearly what we're doing right now isn't working. And so again, as an L&D, as an effective L&D practitioner, you should have a multitude of different tools that you can almost pull from a deck depending on the situation. But that's kind of key. Depending on the situation, you need to understand that situation. You need to understand what is going on, if not at any given moment within the company, then as regularly as possible, just so that you can be there, you can really truly support people, and by extension, the company.
I want to circle back later to the principles of adult learning, but before we get there, I feel like most people go into L&D because they want to be trainers, right?
Yes.
Do you think that's true?
Oh boy. Well, I guess you will get as many answers as people you. I can tell you from my personal experience that I've had L&D roles where I was exclusively focused on delivering trainings. And I've also had L&D roles where I think for a whole year, I didn't deliver a single session. And I think it's very important for people to understand that there are actually different roles within L&D. For example, you can be an instructional designer, or you can be a facilitator, you can be a coach, or from a hierarchical perspective, you can be a manager or a head of the L&D department. So not a lot of managers and head of L&D departments actually spend time in the training room. And that was a disappointment for someone who approached me a few months ago saying, hey, I really love L&D. I really love training. I got promoted because I was really good at doing this. But now I no longer go inside the training room and I miss it. And I hate my job right now because of it. And so this is, apart from this being really, really sad, it just shows that there are variations in what L&D actually does. And there are many different roles in L&D. In terms of training and why people go into it, I can't obviously testify on behalf of everyone in L&D, but I can tell you from my own experience, I come from a family of doctors. So I kind of jokingly say that helping people is in my DNA. And I was never smart enough to become a doctor, but I think that was the next best thing. Helping people, really unlocking that potential, really helping them become self-aware, and then really reaching that next level of their either, again, personal or professional life. And sometimes those two are intertwined when it comes to learning and development anyways. You mentioned my Udemy course earlier. I have probably about 50% of all learners in my Udemy courses are actually teachers, high school teachers or K-12 teachers who want to switch roles and go into the corporate equivalent. And with those people, I always try to make sure that they understand that L&D has many different facets. It's like a Rubik's Cube that has more than 6 sides, really. Because you can have many different roles. If they're looking specifically for anyone who is a teacher watching watching this video right now, I would definitely recommend check out what are the different roles in L&D. Make sure you understand which one fits you best, and then pursue it. Don't pursue L&D because you think it has to do with training. A lot of the time it doesn't.
Interesting. So what, in a related sense, what do you have to be good at to succeed in L&D? I think you've mentioned some of it already, but maybe there's other stuff.
So this is a wonderful question, and it goes back to asking another question beforehand, and that is, what role within L&D are you pursuing? Because each role will have a different focus. Each role will have a different need for a particular competency. For example, an instructional designer would need to be really good at understanding the adult learning principles, understanding how learning works, how knowledge retention works. He or she would need to also understand all the learning authoring tools and so on. More generally speaking, though, if you're in learning and development, the single most important skill that you need to have in any more general learning and development role is stakeholder management. You need to be able to know what's going on throughout the organization, to talk to people, to manage those relationships, to set some expectations, and then manage those expectations throughout the learning process. Right. So regardless of your role within learning and development, be that a trainer, be that a facilitator, an administrator, or a manager, the single most important skill is stakeholder management.
Oh, all right, let's just go into the adult learning principles and styles now. Tell me about those. I mean, I've heard about them so many times.
Yeah.
But never really like in a sort of a concise way. So go.
So the adult learning principles are essentially a few rules of thumb that talk about the differences in adult learning processes. And depending on which source you're looking into, they're usually anywhere between 5 to 7 of those. Okay. I like to stick to 5 because they're kind of easier to remember. Okay. One of them, for example, is the fact that adults are usually focused on achieving goals. So when someone walks into a training or a coaching relationship or even a mentoring one, they want to know what they're getting out of this relationship. They want to know how what they're learning, what they're going through will help them solve a very real, very specific problem that they're facing. Another adult learning principle is that adults usually use their life experiences to help them learn. Now, our brains have a limited memory capacity, so a good workaround that our brains have found is really to link new material to previous experience. So, for example, if I'm learning how to deal with conflict, I will draw upon my previous experience in a conflict situation and sort of look for ways to resolve similar situation more effectively in the future through what I'm learning right now, through that learning material. Actually, I'm curious, what experiences have you had that support this adult learning principle, if you don't mind sharing, of course?
Oh, I mean, my whole YouTube channel. I mean, I had all of this experience in HR.
Yeah.
But I've been through the YouTube channel. I have learned so much more about all of the nuances, but I slotted in all of this learning. I slotted into the framework I already had, which I think was pretty solid. But I'm using all of those experiences to inform and place and remember all of this new stuff I'm taking. I mean, it totally resonates with me, totally makes loads of sense. Even your conflict example.
That's true. Another one of those principles for adult learning is that adults usually have a higher sense of self-direction and motivation. So we learn because we want to, not because we're told to. And this is really the key to all successful development programs. If you have participants who genuinely want to learn and who genuinely want to grow professionally or personally, your learning program will be successful. Whereas on the other hand, if you're putting together a group of people who have been sent there, or people who believe something will happen to them, even if your program is the most amazing one, it just is not going to work. One more thing, and I'm going to stop talking about the adult learning principles, but one more is adults like to choose how they learn. When we are in control, we feel more comfortable, more engaged with our environment. And this principle ultimately gets transferred into the learning process as well. When we have the freedom to choose how we learn, we get involved, we get more engaged with the content, we get more engaged with the process itself. In practice, this means that you can set up different learning opportunities and then let your learners explore them. For example, I would make sure that the same learning material would be available in various formats, as a video, as audio, as reading, as some kind of a role play or simulation. And that maybe it's even a topic of discussion in a coaching or a mentoring conversation. So yeah, essentially, these are just some of the few adult learning principles.
So much of what you just said resonated with me, and I would love to be able to go to training and not have to do role plays. I hate role plays.
It's so funny because I used to love them. As a designer, I used to love them. And then I realized, obviously, very early on in my career, that some people, the moment they hear the word role play, they feel exactly how you just described. They're like, no, I want to leave.
So there was the third learning principle, I think, was we learn because we want to, not because we've been told to. But how often do people say, you see all these employees doing things you don't want them to do. They need to be trained. And then they mass send all of these people to be trained. And it wasn't ever the problem. How do you head that stuff off?
There is this really wonderful saying that if you have a hammer, if all you have is a hammer, then every problem you see becomes a nail to you. Yes. And so you need to kind of understand what are the different sources of the problem so that you can tackle that source. One very simple example, and I do this in my Udemy courses as well as in workshops with face-to-face participants. I give them the following case. A manager receives some feedback from their team members that they're not communicating very effectively. As an L&D person, what do? And so a lot of the people who consider L&D to be a training function, they go, oh, I'm going to offer them some training on communication skills. And I say, great. But what happens if those people are labeling the issue communication, but the issue is something else entirely? Also, what exactly is communication? Is it the listening part? Is it the talking part? Is it the writing part? Like, which part of communication is not working here? Also, how do you know that the whole team is having an issue and not just one person? So there are a lot of words in that request. There are a lot of words that you can try and pick apart to really figure out what is that request, to kind of get to the bottom line so that you're not just treating the problem as a nail, but you're figuring out what the problem is and then treating it. It's kind of like going to the doctors and saying, I need surgery. And the doctor says, okay, right? That's ludicrous. That would never happen. A doctor needs to give you a once over. They need to run some tests. They need to kind of figure out what the issue is and then prescribe whatever they prescribe, pills, procedures, whatever it may be. So we need to stop, again, treating training as the one and only solution to all problems.
Yeah. Well, it just seems to me that when it comes to training, that, there's so many professionals out there developing training, let's say communication skills. Do you really need those L&D people internally? What's the case?
Oh, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes. Well, yes, not no. Absolutely, yes. I say no because there are certain organizational structures that don't necessarily call for the need of a dedicated L&D personnel. A good example of those are startups. When you are working to create a product, you're working under very strict deadlines, you need to like get investors in, you don't have time to pause and be like, I wonder what my issue is and how can I solve it through learning? That's not going to happen in a startup. But in larger organizations, you're going to have a dedicated team of people who will be aware of what is going on throughout the business, will be able to manage all the key stakeholders and really deliver very targeted, very on time, the right people, the right place, the right time sort of learning solutions and learning experiences. But having said that, there is a case for, and as you said, there are a lot of vendors out there who deliver these trainings. I am myself one of those. One of my businesses is being a learning and development consultant. There is definitely time and place for using those. And that time and place is kind of three things need to happen. Okay. First, you definitely, and this is probably the most important one, you need someone external to the organization to facilitate the process. There may be a lot of political pressures, let's call them pressures, that you may want to kind of walk around or be very careful with. In that case, you could definitely use an external vendor or an external consultant. And the other two conditions is you don't have the know-how and or you don't have the capacity to design something yourself. Right. At the end of the day, there are a lot of amazing learning and development people out there that do have the know-how, maybe even have the capacity, but they do need someone external to kind of come in and almost bring a fresh perspective. And yes, as long as there is a need, a justified need within the organization to have a learning and development department, I say go for it, have it.
Yeah.
You won't regret it.
Final question here is, where can someone learn more about L&D?
So obviously Udemy has a wealth of different courses on the different parts of learning and development. One thing that unfortunately I'm still not seeing, and I do crave the competition, is another course specifically dedicated to learning and development, to kind of the overall function. So if you want to learn more about learning and development, Udemy is definitely a good place to start. If you want to go more in depth, this is what my partner and I created a couple of years ago called the L&D Academy. And this is where we try to explain in most basic terms what L&D is all about. What are the different processes in it? How do you go about needs assessment? How do you evaluate the impact of learning? And this is actually kind of the extension to that was our YouTube channel, which thank you so much for mentioning again. Other than that, there are so many wonderful sources to try out there. If you're in Europe, then definitely check out the CIPD. They have amazing resources, majority of them for free. If you're in North America, the American Talent and Development Association, I think they're called, or ATD, they have also amazing courses and amazing resources. They publish a lot of books, some really, really great books. Some of them are actually behind me on the shelves. But the truth is, and I'm going to be very, very kind of honest here and maybe brutal to some people, if you want to learn more about L&D, do L&D. It's great to get some theoretical preparation, but the best way to learn is to actually do it. Get yourself dirty, get your hands dirty, go out there, talk to people, try to understand what it's all about, try to do the wrong things as many times as possible, not the same wrong things, try to do different wrong things until you get that good balance of figuring out, oh, this is the right thing to do then.
Well, thanks, Irina. That was so great. I know that a lot of us out there are in positions of having to deliver training because of our expertise. The same goes for me. The next time I'm doing it, though, I'm really going to be mindful of the adult learning principles. And that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening out there. We'll catch you next time when I talk shop with another insightful guest.